It was October of 2006, and like all of the other 10-year-olds I knew, I made a list of everything I wanted to be for Halloween. But when my mom saw that list, she said, "Oh, no, honey, nurses and teachers are girl costumes. You should be a gangster. Or a hobo." My mom's choices in costumes aside, I wasn't allowed to be what I wanted because she had some idea of what a boy, or even a man, is supposed to be. Even though we live in a society constantly moving towards accepting the individual, we still teach men to fit a general mold. By first, examining the modern and traditional definitions of manhood. And second, why it's so difficult to escape an old standard. And finally, how we can all benefit from a new perspective. We can ditch the universal standard of masculinity while embracing our own ideas of what it really means to be a man. My dad played varsity football and ran track in both high school and college. So naturally, when I got to middle school, I tried out for the musical. While my sister became a national champion in volleyball at 13 years old. She's a better son than me. Now this asks the question of what being a man even means, not only to ourselves, but to the people around us. So first, let's look at the old definition of manhood, and second, why that no longer applies. Ever since the hunter-gatherer days, men have pretty much always been in charge, and that teaches other men to fit a very specific standard. Now that standard was defined by Dr. Kevin Thomas in his 2013 study published by Johns Hopkins University. And he explained that traditional men are indifferent, aggressive, and domineering. Now that way of life is what our fathers and grandfathers' generations grew up with. That's what they've taught us from a very young age. However, this narrow view of what it means to be a man doesn't apply to society anymore. Last year, award-winning photographer Chad States put an ad on Craigslist, stay with me here, asking for anybody who identified as masculine to participate in his latest photo series. He got responses from straight men, gay men, transgender individuals, and even women, all of whom identified as being masculine. This shattering of who's allowed to be masculine has the ability to make our society more inclusive of those who don't fit traditional gender roles. But we still have work to do before we can get there. Now, while I had to settle for being a businessman for Halloween, my sister got to be Mulan. When she started singing "I'll make a man out of you," I realized Mulan is just part of the problem. And she wants a man as swift as the coursing river with all the force of a great typhoon. That's literally impossible. And as harmless as it seems, those definitions are everywhere, and they foster the unattainable goal men are constantly taught to achieve. Now, the reasons we have trouble escaping this standard are twofold. We fail to adapt to a modern society, and we have a fear of being different. But first, according to Forbes magazine, the worst jobs of 2013 included lumberjack, oil rig worker, dairy farmer, and roofer. What do those jobs all have in common? Well, besides the fact that A&E's making them into reality shows, they're all traditionally masculine. In just one example, after the housing bubble burst in 2008, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics reported as recently as December of 2013 that nearly 20% of jobs in the male-dominated construction industry, that's the livelihoods of nearly 2 million families, were lost. And as horrible as that seems, construction worker didn't even make Forbes' worst jobs list. Every day, responsibilities traditionally reserved for men are becoming unnecessary, outdated, and cost-inefficient. In order to survive in a modern economy, men need to go into fields they might not have considered 20 or even 10 years ago. Yet, even when men want to change, they often feel trapped by outdated stereotypes. Filmmaker Jennifer Newsom interviewed boys and men across the nation for her documentary, The Mask You Live In, asking them what it really means to be a man. They consistently told her they are dying to speak, but they're taught to stay silent. Many of the men she spoke with felt like they couldn't express themselves because they were too afraid of the consequences for being different, stopping them from being the people they really wanted to be. My parents got divorced when I was 13, and I felt like I needed to be the man of the house for my mom and the man my dad always wanted me to be, well before I was ready to think about adulthood. Fortunately, I was able to sit down and have a conversation with my dad and explain that the direction I wanted to go in with my life was different than the one I felt like I was expected to. He understood where I was coming from. Imagine if we could all have these conversations. We could first reevaluate what men and women are supposed to do, and second, stop pressuring each other to fit any mold. First, changing our perspectives devalues traditional gender roles and benefits both genders. The National At-Home Dad Network, a nonprofit organization advocating for stay-at-home dads, explains that more men are taking on responsibilities traditionally reserved for women, such as taking care of the kids. Now, this then frees up the spouses of the at-home dads to pursue successful careers outside of the home and break down even more barriers there. With more roles losing their single-gender tendencies, men and women can work in jobs traditionally reserved for the opposite sex, not creating two equal courts, but one level playing field. In addition, loosening our standards opens us up to new experiences uncommon to my father and to his father, and will allow me to introduce them to my children when I'm a father. To get to that point, we have to change the way we think about men. Urban artist and poet Guante said in a viral 2013 YouTube video titled Man Up that he wants to have meaningful and emotional relationships with his brothers. He can't. Because our society tells us that's not what a man does. I grew up with a father who spent his childhood hunting, fishing, and playing football. I've never shot a gun. My sister still puts the worm on the hook for me, and I do speech instead of sports. I chose that path for myself because that's who I am. And there is no reason why every man can't choose to be an individual instead of hiding behind someone else's mask. Nowadays, when I dress up for Halloween, I go out as myself, because I don't need to pretend to be something I'm not. Also, I am way too lazy to find a good Halloween costume. We've seen how the role of man has transformed over time, why it's so difficult to escape tradition, and how we can all benefit from a new perspective. But now we have a decision to make. Joan C. Williams, a professor at the University of California, tells us that men are left facing two choices. They can feel terrible about themselves, or they can help to change an outdated ideal. So let's change this. And finally, man up.